He took the microphone with a hand that never trembled, looked at the sea of cameras and chandeliers, and said, "This is a contract. Nothing more." The music died so abruptly I could hear the sound of my own breath shatter. He didn't touch my cheek, didn't meet my eyes, didn't even pretend. He slipped the ring onto my finger as if it burned him, then let it go like a coin into a fountain he never intended to visit again. He was a storm dressed in a tuxedo. I was a girl who'd spent the night sewing a missing button onto her white dress because I had no one to help me. When he walked past me to greet investors and old friends, I smelled the cologne of victory on him and the poverty of my history on me. Someone laughed near the cake. Someone whispered, "She's lucky he noticed her at all." I stood under a chandelier that looked like falling ice and felt myself freeze inside it. 5 years later, he is kneeling in the rain beside my grave, fingers pressed to the stone as if it is the only thing still warm in a world that forgot to forgive us. His shoulders shake when no one is watching. He whispers apologies to the earth like prayer. The marble gleams with his grief and the rain. And I, too alive for the name carved there, watch from a distance with a heart that both breaks and remembers how to beat. My name is Mira. Before the ring, before the humiliation, I belonged to a one-room life, a mattress on the floor, a kettle with a stubborn lid, a mother whose breath sounded like a door that wouldn't open. I worked the night shift stacking files at the Reyes Group, slipping an extra hour here and there to pay for pills with names I couldn't pronounce. I ate quietly so my hunger wouldn't wake me. I prayed quietly so God wouldn't see I was bargaining. He was Arden Reyes, that surname the city's second language. He learned power the way other boys learned how to ride a bicycle, hands-off and fearless. He smiled politely at cameras and crushed men in boardrooms where the carpet drank secrets. He believed love was leverage. He believed marriages were mergers. He believed my kind of girl existed to hold doors and carry coffee and vanish like mist when the sun came up. Our lives collided in an elevator that chose the worst day of my year to break down. I was late with a folder, he was late with a fate. He checked his watch, I checked my courage. When the lights blinked and the air grew anxious, I pressed my palm to the metal and started telling stories to keep the silence from swallowing us. I told him about my mother's fish soup and the summer our roof tried to fly away, about a stray cat that thought our bed was a boat. He stared like a man trying not to stare, and when the doors finally opened, we stepped out onto 2 different planets. His grandfather's will was a trap disguised as blessing, marry by 32 or lose the crown. The board sharpened their smiles. The tabloids sharpened their knives. He needed a bride without a price. Only a clause. I needed money I could not earn in a decade to buy my mother a breath that didn't hurt. There is a corridor in the human heart where desperation meets pride, deals are signed there with pens that leak a little blood. The contract said 1 year. The contract said separate rooms. The contract said no children, no duties, no charity beyond the number typed neatly under settlement. He slid the papers across a glass table that reflected my face and a future I did not dare look at for too long. He did not raise his voice, he raised his eyebrow. I signed where he pointed and told myself I was not selling love, I was buying time. On our wedding day, I wore borrowed silk and an honesty I couldn't pawn. He wore a mask cut from the same cloth as his suit. When he said, "This is a contract," and the room gasped like a single mouth, I swallowed my vows like pills without water. My mother couldn't come. She was at home, sleeping under a blanket that smelt of menthol and memory, thinking her girl had married a man who would carry her through storms. I stared at the glittering ceiling until it turned into stars I could not touch. Later, after the photos were staged and the smiles were stapled on, he left in a car that moved like a sentence. I rode home to a house with 2 wings and no birds. His mother, Alia, lived in the East Wing where the sunlight behaved more kindly. Alzheimer's had turned her days into a string of beads with missing colors. Sometimes she called me daughter, sometimes she called me water. I learned how to make her tea without waking the ghosts. I learned how to braid hair that once braided his. I learned how to turn soft noises into shelter. At night, I slept on a bed that could have held more, and wrote letters to a man who did not know how to receive them. Dear Arden, I wrote. I know I am not your story. But I am here, and I am trying to treat your name gently. I left the letters in a drawer that smelt of cedar and sorrow. They were not for posting. They were for the version of him that might one day open a drawer looking for forgiveness and find it folded neatly enough to try on. He was cold the way marble is cold, not unfeeling, exactly, just convinced that warmth is for the weak. He watched me as if I were a rumor. He asked for dinner and ate alone. He placed his cufflinks on the table like coins on a ferryman's palm and disappeared into rooms with views I never knew how to describe. But a human heart is an unlicensed architect. It builds shelters where it should build walls. I found myself memorizing the sound of his footsteps, learning the geometry of his silence, discovering small proofs of kindness left accidentally in his wake, a blanket pulled up over his mother's knees, a light turned low where morning might hurt, a book spine straightened on a shelf, out of respect for its tiredness. The city loved our marriage like a scandal. Reporters hid behind lamp posts. A woman I'd never met called me a gold digger with a mouth full of gold. At a gala 8 months in, his ex, sharp heels, sharper smile, spilled wine on my dress and said, "Wear this red. It's closer to your true color." Arden's jaw tensed. His hand twitched as if remembering how to hold. But he said nothing. I wiped the stain and asked the universe to invent a forgiveness big enough for women who have never been taught to be kind. Then the storm arrived with all its gutters. An anonymous tip leaked to the press that money from the Reyes Foundation had gone to my mother's clinic under a code name that matched a bracelet on my wrist. It looked like theft. It looked like love turned into leverage. The board murmured. The city roared. He called a press conference on a Tuesday that tasted like metal, looked straight through me, and said, "We are handling a betrayal." My name was not said, but it was heard everywhere. "Is that what I am to you?" I asked him when the cameras went home to live in other people's walls. He was standing by the window, rain making lines down glass like counting. "A calculation," he said. Softly. And it hurt more because it was soft. "You were the cleanest solution." "My mother can breathe," I said. "If that makes me a thief, then I stole air." We slept in rooms that argued through the corridor. I stopped writing letters to the version of him that might never exist. Alia reached for my hand and told me she liked my perfume, though I wasn't wearing any. I told her the smell of forgiveness is just warm tea on a day that forgot to be gentle. The truth arrived late, as truth often does, dressed in a file folder left where my broom of a hope could sweep it. I found the original authorization, not mine. Not even his. A signature I recognized from board meetings where men clapped each other on the back like brothers. The plot was simple and ancient: destroy the girl so the crown feels safer. Feed the wolves so they leave your door. I took the folder to him. He stared so long the room ran out of breath. The apology in his throat tripped over the same pride that had once humiliated me. He said my name like an open window. I waited for repentance dressed as words. I wanted him to perform the surgery the moment needed, cut, clean, close. He said, "I should have asked you." It was almost enough. Almost. That night, the house stood very still. The rain slept. The city held its breath with us. He knocked on my door once and did not come in. The next day, I left. Not dramatically. I took 2 dresses, a book, the letters I never sent, and a mouthful of silence. I went to my mother because she was the only geography I trusted. I told her I was filing for divorce. I did not tell her that my body felt like winter. A week later, I learned I was carrying a heartbeat that had not asked for our mess. I pressed my palm to my flat belly and felt the kind of terror that takes off its shoes and sits down with you. The contract had said no children. Life had said otherwise. I walked along the river talking to a tiny sailor who did not answer. I decided to choose this life with both hands even if it turned mine into a thinner kind of living. Pregnancy was a song I knew from other women. In me, it was a warning. Preeclampsia crept in with swollen ankles and headaches like falling televisions. The doctor frowned at numbers and told me to rest, as if a poor girl knows how. I wrote a letter to Arden I did not plan to send. If you had called me wife just once when it mattered, I might have stayed long enough for the word to teach us both a gentler way to stand. When the seizure came, it arrived like a thief that did not bother with doors. Light went white, sound went away. I heard my mother shout my name from a dark hallway. Then nothing. Then waking. Then a room that buzzed. Then a nurse with eyes like lanterns telling me the baby was small but fierce. A daughter. Wrinkled and furious. Breathing like someone who had fought the sea and won a thin beach. And then the world did the thing it sometimes does, it offered me a cruel mercy. A clerical error, a panicked clerk, a tragedy that was not mine attached to the wrong name. The hospital printed a death certificate with my details. The news traveled faster than life, as grief always does. Someone messaged someone who knew someone and, by evening, there was a rumor that I had died in childbirth. I was not dead. I was holding a life that made my hands shake with awe. But the board had sharpened their blades for months. His ex had a journalist on speed dial. A nurse who owed me a kindness noticed the mistake and said, "We could correct it. Or, we could give you a door." Why did I step through? Because fear had learned my new address. Because I could not bear the thought of my daughter, a secret about to be tabloid, becoming a weapon in a war that chose her without consent. Because sometimes survival looks like betrayal to someone who has never had to hide. I disappeared into a borrowed apartment with curtains that filtered the afternoon into something that looked like hope. I learned the choreography of night feeds and lullabies. I named her Kaya because she held me steady in waters I did not know how to read. I found odd jobs behind counters where no one asked for my last name. I sent Alia postcards with no return address, writing, "The clouds are kind today. Drink your tea hot." She pinned them to a board the nurses called her weather. And then one evening, crossing the park to a market that sold peaches with bruised sweetness, I saw him. Not the suit. Not the storm. Just a man alone by a grave with my name on it. He was quieter by then. Softer at the edges, as if grief had sanded him until he fitted inside the world instead of demanding it fit him. He touched the stone with tenderness that would have unmade me, if I hadn't already done the unmaking myself. He came every week. Sometimes with flowers that knew they would die and came anyway. Sometimes with nothing but his hands. The city whispered a new story, widower CEO devotes his life to charity. Scholarships in my name appeared like candles in windows I had never passed. He visited the clinic where my mother breathed and donated machines that hummed like second chances. He knelt in churches he had mocked. He stood on stages and talked about love and language accountants couldn't audit. He cried where no cameras could find him. I know because I watched, from the distance that safety demanded and longing refused to respect. When Kaya turned 3, her hair discovered curls like unplanned questions. Her laughter sounded like spoons in a glass. She asked me why I cried when it rained. I told her water remembers. She asked me where her father was. I told her he was a story still learning how to end. On the 5th anniversary of my supposed death, the city woke with fog in its eyelashes. I bought daisies, the cheap kind that make a room look like it forgave you, for a grave that did not hold me. I told myself I came to put a period where life had left an ellipsis. I told myself I came to say goodbye properly to the version of me that had died, even if my breath still fogged a mirror. I told myself 100 careful lies. The truth was simple. I wanted to see if the man who humiliated me could learn to kneel without worshipping his own reflection. He was already there, kneeling. His hair had learned gray. His hands were no longer marble. He touched the letters of my name like Braille, reading a story he had finally allowed himself to know. I stood behind a yew tree and told my heart to behave. It has never listened to me, why would it start now? A small hand slipped out of mine and into the morning. Kaya, curious ship, brave captain, walked straight toward the man she had never seen and said, "Why are you sad?" He startled. He turned. For a second the old mask twitched, then fell, and he smiled the way a man smiles when he recognizes something he has been missing without knowing where he left it. "Because the world is full of late apologies," he said. "That's silly," she announced, "because children are born with the wisdom we spend our lives trying to earn. You can say sorry now." He laughed, a cracked bell finding enough sound to matter. "You're right." He looked past her then, past the daisies, past the years, and found me. I saw the moment my face rearranged his world. He did not speak. He stood up slowly, as if gravity had just turned compassionate. "I am alive," I said, "because sometimes you have to say the obvious to make it real. They made a mistake, and I let the mistake protect us." "Us," he repeated. The word put down luggage between us. He looked at Kaya. She looked back like a judge with jelly on her chin. "Is she?" "She is the only part of us that never hurt me," I said. My voice trembled but did not break. "Her name is Kaya." He turned away for a moment, the way men do when they need to hide the thing their faces are about to confess. When he turned back, his eyes were ocean deep and shoreline tired. "Mira," he said. My name broke in his mouth and came together in mine. "I don't deserve to ask for anything." "Good," I said, "because cruelty is a coat I know how to wear but don't like the weight of." "Then don't ask." "Listen." We stood near the stone that had been both shield and sin. I told him about the contract that cut me and the vow that could have stitched me if he'd believed in something softer than fear. I told him about Alia's tea and the postcards, about nights that opened like mouths and how Kaya taught me to sleep with the light on inside. I told him about the folder, about the smile behind the sabotage, about the way betrayal sits in chairs we keep offering because we don't know there are other rooms. "I was proud," he said finally, like a confession to a priest who has heard it all. "Pride taught me to humiliate first and feel later. I did not know how to protect anything I could not own as an asset. I learned too late that love is not leverage. I learned it in front of your name." Behind us, the morning shook fog out of its sleeves. Kaya poked the earth with a stick as if planting something invisible. "Are you still angry?" she asked me, without looking up. "Children are ruthless in service of clarity." "Yes," I said, "because truth is a medicine and lying to children is the first sin we learn by accident. But my anger has learned to sit. It does not stand between us anymore." His ex was gone, married to a senator who wanted her smile at fundraisers. The board member with the convenient signature was convicted for a crime that did not involve us and punished for 1,000 that did. Karma walks slowly but she knows the address. Arden had named the scholarship fund after the girl the city thought was dead. Alia's nurses wheeled her into a garden I had never seen, where roses learned my name without having to be told. When Arden said these things, he said them without the vanity of a man reciting good deeds. He said them like inventory in a house being rebuilt after a fire. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "To carry your bags," he said. It was so simple it undid me. To pick up grocery lists and dirty plates, to put gas in the car, to sit up with fevers and watch cartoons I hate, to be a father who pays attention, to be a man who says I am sorry without looking at a clock. I looked at the stone. The dates were a lie that had kept me alive. The dash between them had become a prayer. I thought about forgiveness, which is not a door we unlock for someone else, but a window we open so we can breathe. I thought about the day he humiliated me and how humiliation is a kind of hunger, it eats until there is nothing left to love. I thought about the girl I was, stitching her own gown, counting her own courage. I thought about the woman I had become, raising a life that didn't ask to be brave and became brave anyway. Start with being her father, I said. Start with weekends at the park and bedtime stories and a voice that forgets to be iron. Start with apologies that don't need me to clap. We will not be a headline again. We will be small and ordinary, or nothing at all. He nodded like a man who had finally found a language that did not insult him. He crouched so his eyes met Kaya's, not mine, and asked if he could push her on the swing when the rain stopped. She studied him, then offered him the dignity of a child's mercy. "Only if you go high," she said. He laughed like a promise. We met every Saturday in a park where the grass remembered bare feet. He arrived in shirts that had learned softness. He carried snacks he had clearly Googled. He learned to braid badly and then less badly. He practiced the art of showing up, witchcraft more powerful than any money he'd ever moved. At night, alone, I opened the old letters to the man I had hoped he might be and wept for their prescience. On Sundays, at the clinic, I brought Alia flowers and read to her from a book of poems she had loved before the alphabet rearranged itself in her hands. Sometimes she called me daughter. Sometimes she called me the name of a star. "Do you still want a divorce?" he asked one day, months later, on a bench painted the color of someone's optimism. He didn't say it like a threat or an invitation. He said it like a weather report. "Here is the chance of rain, bring the right coat." "I want a funeral," I said. He frowned, then waited. Waiting is a love language people like him learn late. I want to bury the version of us that began with humiliation and contracts. I want to plant something over its grave that smells alive. We returned to the stone that had held our lie. We brought trowels and seeds and the kind of quiet humans make when they are finally speaking true. Kaya drew a heart in the dirt because that is what you do when grown-ups get complicated. I pressed my palm to my name and whispered to the girl who had stood under the chandelier and turned herself.